It's Mo Bashir for the Hook. I'm delighted to be joined by Ellie. Ellie, we met at the sports networking event with Joe Apsey. We didn't really get to speak with each other, but obviously I've heard about some of the work that you're doing, and I think it sort of ties in well with what we're trying to achieve with the Hook, and that is to maybe focus on the business side of, we do say combat sports, but I'm open to all sport because I love sport. So I guess we'll just start off with that, a little bit about your background and how you got to the position that you're in.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. Where to go back to, I guess, with my story as such. So yeah, I'm the founder of Press Upload, and we work with athletes to help them build and monetize their brand on social media. So we've very much seen the rise of athlete-driven content, athletes seeing themselves as content creators, entrepreneurs, building their brand on all the different social platforms. So it's a really exciting space, a really exciting opportunity. In terms of my background, I went to university and I did history and Spanish, so very sort of traditional educational background. Whilst I was at university, I launched One Glow 360, which was a sort of a travel brand as such. So it started as a blog, then became a podcast, then sort of the different social media platforms, YouTube, all of that. I did a few brand partnerships, and I just got obsessed with content, the creator economy, and how it all worked essentially. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Always wanted to do something a little bit different than the norm in terms of just going into a corporate job or, following that sort of slightly more normal route, which is totally fine, by the way. The majority of people do that, and that's great. But I just wanted to do something, a little bit different. So I launched Press Upload at university. It started as a marketplace to connect content creators to freelancers. Then it shifted into working with sort of founders, execs, creators with their content. Then it shifted across to athletes, which is now what we do. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, a really positive one, and I've shifted and evolved and adapted myself as a founder, but also within the business too. So a lot of opportunity. We're working with athletes globally across different markets, different sports, different interests. So yeah, there's a lot to juggle and a lot to achieve beyond what we've sort of achieved currently. But yeah, I'm really excited.
You mentioned that what you did with the travel blog.
Yeah.
I noticed on your LinkedIn that it said that you had 50,000 followers across, I think it was YouTube, social media, LinkedIn, and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
guess like it seems from the outside looking in that you're very good at creating an audience and sort of, you know, building that interaction with people. How important, I guess, was that to sort of kickstart your content journey?
Yeah, I think it taught me a lot about content, from the basics of algorithms and editing and all of that, all the way up to community, how to build a community, because that's challenging, right? There's a difference between an audience and a community. A community is an engaged audience. Anyone could build an audience and just grow followers. But actually, if you want brand partnerships, if you want, really close connections with your followers, that's what community is. And there's so many benefits and advantages of building that community as opposed to just sort of a surface level kind of audience. So yeah, I learned a lot, from videos that didn't do very well to videos that did well, and sort of trying to figure out what was the difference between the two. And I did a lot of sort of collabs, and I joined communities. I did a few courses to sort of learn more about the creator space. So I, invested into my growth within the space. I invested in people. I invested in putting myself out there. So yeah, I learned a lot, and that developed my skill set, expertise, knowledge, experience, all of that. Alongside success to an extent, there was a lot of failures too, a lot of videos that didn't do very well, and sort of thinking, oh, like that's quite annoying. I put a lot of time, energy, and attention into that, and trying to figure out why that was the case. But it's been a huge journey and process, and I'm still learning too, right? I'm not got the magic formula to grow an athlete brand. We're developing that as we go, which is the exciting part, right? As we go and work with the athletes that we work with, we develop how to make the best athlete brand for them. There's not one size fits all. It's a process we need to go through with every athlete we work with.
With the travel blog, and we'll come on to the athletes soon after,
Yeah.
but how did you sort of, like, when you started it out, did it start out as an idea to launch a business out of it, or was it just a way of, like, it was just a passion? How did you figure out, like, how to monetize it going forward? Because I think a lot of content creators, including myself as well, are sort of trying to make a business out of doing what we're doing. So how
Mhm.
did you know that you were able to monetize it?
Yeah, so it was a pandemic passion project, in all honesty. So I did a gap year before university, so did a lot of traveling. I've always enjoyed creating content. When I was younger, I'd film sort of short vlogs on family trips and that sort of thing. And yeah, so it was a pandemic passion project. I was in my first year of university, and then, overnight we were sort of sent home, and, we were in lockdown essentially. And I struggled with purpose. I'm someone that likes structure, routine, and I lost that pretty quickly in terms of being at university to then being at home. And then, all my exams I was meant to have to revise for became essays. So the structure of my sort of university sort of changed overnight. So I was, struggling for that purpose and like, what do I do every day? I was like sort of getting a bit antsy, thinking like, what can I do? So I thought, well, let's just launch a travel blog. Let's write about the experiences I had on my gap year. Then it became a podcast. So I don't know if you've heard of Race Across the World, a travel program on BBC.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I sort of
I've heard of it.
interviewed a few of those contestants, which was really cool. Then that developed into interviewing other sort of travel creators. The podcasts, then that became probably sort of like TikTok, Instagram, so short form content. Then it became YouTube. So I went to Barcelona on my year abroad because I did Spanish university. And yeah, I just thought, I'd love to document my experience living in a new country. And, I thought for my friends and family, they might watch it. And then slowly but surely it grew sort of beyond that. I didn't go into it wanting to make loads of money or wanting to necessarily make a business. It was purely, can I find myself a purpose during the pandemic? And it gave me that, which was a huge sort of savior, in itself, and gave me that reason to sort of like jump out of bed every day. During lockdown, we weren't allowed out really. So I needed a reason to really jump out of bed and get on with sort of work during the day. And it gave me that, which was, really exciting. But yeah, I think probably, at some point it switched into, okay, I've built a bit of an audience and a community to an extent, can I monetize this now, essentially? And it was affiliate marketing I tapped into a lot. That was where I made quite a bit of money, actually, in terms of working with a few businesses and sort of promoting through affiliate opportunities, a few brand partnerships, very light touch. We're not talking like thousands of pounds here. We're talking sort of hundreds, but it was enough for me to sort of think, hang on, like I've done this myself on a relatively small scale. I'd love to build a business around helping others do the same, essentially. And then that developed from, creators, founders, all the way up to athletes, essentially.
Do you think like that helped you starting it out as a passion and then sort of going into the business side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you sort of go in with the mentality to make lots of money straight away, it's quite overwhelming. It's a lot of pressure because from day one, you're trying to think, how do I make money from this? How do I monetize this? And that's a lot to put on yourself. Creating content in itself is a challenge, right? Let alone trying to monetize it. So yeah, I think it was a process I went through for probably 3 or 4 years of just trying to figure out the content piece first, then how to monetize it. So it's not, a overnight success story or like it happens quickly. For me, it was a process that took years, and for most creators, that's normal. You see sort of the influencer sort of creators that get the big brand deals and all of that. And you think, if they're doing it, can I do it? Or how do I do it? But actually, for most creators, it's a process. And there's a lot of support tools, resources. AI is obviously massive to help sort of speed up the content process, today. But yeah, a lot of opportunity to monetize. Is just trying to figure out how to do that, basically.
And then when did the idea of press upload come in? Like, were you doing the two simultaneously?
Yes. So the concept for press upload, I started, I guess that was sort of 2022. So just before my final year of university. I just thought, let's build something. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to build a business. I'd been doing sort of content myself, and I thought, can I build some sort of business around this? So yeah, it started as that sort of marketplace. I wanted to be a bit of a competitor to Fiverr. I don't know why I ever thought I could compete with like the likes of sort of Fiverr and Upwork, but I wanted to build a marketplace that sort of was specific for content creators in terms of giving them opportunities to get freelance support to elevate their sort of content and brand partnerships and all of that. And I mean, I got about 40 freelancers on the platform, built a website. Like, it was a decent business. It didn't make a lot of money, but it was a decent process I went through with that. It taught me a lot about resilience, a lot about patience, a lot about communication and how important that is. But it was never going to work. I might have thought that it might when I was sort of like 22, 23, like, I've got this next big idea, but it truly wasn't. And that's what most entrepreneurs go through. They think their first idea is the idea, and then actually you realize that your third or fourth idea is probably the idea that's going to make you the money. So yeah, it started as that, and then it developed obviously into the sort of agency to support founders, creators, sort of more broadly with content and commercial support. Then obviously it transitioned into athletes relatively quickly after that point. So yeah, I've been doing Press Upload for, I guess, 3 years at this point. Obviously not the Press Upload as it is today, but it's been a huge journey, and we're only getting started, to be honest.
And then the idea of going into like focusing on athletes, was sport a sort of industry that you always saw yourself in, or was it a case of my fourth idea happens to be in sport. I sort
Yeah,
of fell into it.
a bit of both. Yeah, so my dream was to be a cricketer for England. So cricket was my sort of main sport growing up. I played cricket, I played football, I played hockey, netball, any sport I could sort of try and do, I played it. So I've always loved sport, and yeah, I just I thought, if I'm not going to be an athlete, what's the next sort of best job? And that's to work with athletes, work within sport. And I've got a few friends that made it sort of pro cricketers and pro athletes, and I had conversations with them about their brand and content and brand partnerships, and seeing themselves as a creator as such, and whether they sort of resonated with that. And I got good feedback, from the contacts and friends that I have, and I thought, yeah, well, sport's a great industry to build in. It's huge. There's so much opportunity in this sort of rise of athlete-driven content, and athletes seeing themselves as a business. They've got a brand that they can monetize. They've got a brand that they can turn into a business, in terms of launching something else beyond that. So it was a natural process. But yeah, I've got quite a big sort of sporty background in terms of playing sport. A few friends that made it pro that I was able to chat to, and Danny Gibson, one of our first clients, is one of my best friends of over 15 years. So that natural connection, helped to get the ball rolling, essentially. So we launched YouTube with her. We've got brand partnerships, we've got short form content. So that sort of partnership developed over time, but sort of started as YouTube. So yeah, all in all, probably a bit of a hybrid approach to it all. I saw the opportunity, but I've also got that sporty background too.
Awesome. And then so obviously you mentioned starting a YouTube, Instagram, TikTok.
Yeah.
So when you go in and you're someone comes to you and says, I want to improve my online presence, is that where you start off with, and then maybe how does then brands come into it? Is it a case of first building the online presence and then introducing them to brands? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we've got a framework, we call it the sort of the Press Upload playbook, and it's a 3-step framework that we do with every athlete we work with. So it's the 3 Ps, which is positioning, presence, partnerships. So positioning is the first step. So it's the athlete's brand identity, the person behind the player, essentially. So, what makes them different? What are their values, interests, and hobbies? Once you've got clarity about that, then presence is the content output that matches the brand identity. So once you've got clarity again about all of that, so that's what content, what platforms, is it short form content, long form content? So once you've done those first 2 steps, we find the third step, as in partnerships, is so much easier to unlock in terms of volume of partnerships, the lucrative nature of opportunities, the actual performance of the content in the partnership is actually better because there's clarity about who the athlete is, the content they create, and being intentional behind it. So that's the sort of framework we utilize. And absolutely, partnerships, we're proactive to get the athletes partnerships as soon as possible, but there's a bit of groundwork which probably takes sort of 4 to 6 weeks prior to that point where we really, really try and get them the deal. We'll do outreach from day one, but in terms of being really, really for us to feel clarity about what brands for them to work with, we've got to do that front piece of work, which takes sort of 4 to 6 weeks, which doing that well sets the athlete up for forever, we feel.
Okay, and then what sort of the initial 4 to 6 weeks,
Yeah.
is that you really owning in on the content side of things, short form, long form, etc.
Yeah, it's just beyond that. It's the athlete's brand identity. It's the positioning of them across sort of other brands. What makes them different to a teammate or another footballer or another cricketer? Like that groundwork to understand who is the athlete, what brand do they want to build, what partnerships do they want to unlock? Is there a bigger picture where they want to launch a business at some point? Like there's so much clarity that we need to get before we even do the sort of the groundwork. We call it sort of the athlete brand blueprint a little bit in terms of we build that first, which is essentially like a 20 to 30 page document, which gives them clarity about all of that I mentioned in terms across that that sort of playbook and framework. And yeah, once we've got clarity about that, once we've given them clarity about that, it just makes the monetization piece 10 times easier. Because if they want to launch a business, we look how they can monetize that. If they want to launch or they want brand partnerships, we know that from a sort of monetization perspective, that's the focus point. So that groundwork is so important. Without that and just rushing from day one, it doesn't give the athletes the best outcomes, which ultimately doesn't give us the best outcomes as well.
And then on that, what's sort of the biggest misconceptions athletes and people in general have about personal branding and attracting sponsors, would you say?
I think that it's like a quick process, because it's not for anyone, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a travel creator, whatever niche you operate in as a content creator. It's very rarely quick. It's always, worth, it's not a long process, but it's always worth pursuing that long process, because if you set yourself up well, it sets yourself up for years and decades ahead, right? If you sort of rush the process and you've not got a strategy, you've not got understanding about your positioning, who you are, what you stand for, it just makes the whole process messy. It makes you sort of like not have clarity about who you want to work with, or what success ultimately looks like. So that's probably the biggest misconception, is like wanting brand deals like on day one or after like 2 weeks. No one really gets that, whether you're a travel creator, like I said, a fashion creator, or an athlete. I think sometimes there's that perception that because I'm an athlete, I should get brand deals. And I'm like, well, now it's athlete versus athlete creator. If you're not creating content as an athlete, the opportunities are going to the athletes that are creating content, building their brand. Yes, there'll be some cases where if the athlete is so good on the pitch or on the court, they will always get brand deals. I take that, absolutely, that's a true point. But if you take the majority of athletes that are not like Ronaldo, for example, if you're not creating content and building your brand, it's unlikely you'll be able to unlock, serious commercial opportunity. So I think it's just trying to educate. We've got sort of the 2 E's, which is educate and execute. So the first step is educate the athlete. Why bother building your brand? What does it even mean to build your brand? What is your brand? Like, who do you want to be and what do you stand for? And then the process they need to take to get to success ultimately. Once they've got clarity about the educational part, then it's execute. Then it's content ideation, the strategy, the blueprint, the video editing we do, the in-person shoots, the brand partnerships, all of that. That's the execute piece. But there's a two-pronged approach to it, and it's educating the athletes about all of that. Essentially, it's not quick, but it's always worth it.
That's quite interesting, right? Because you was talking about like they're competing with athletes and then athletes who are creating content. But I guess the third category is that they're competing with creators who are creating content that's going absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Like, they're basically dealing with people whose full-time job is to create content and to cultivate an audience, and they've got hundreds of thousands of followers. Crazy.
Yeah, but they're competing on the pitch and they're competing off the pitch essentially. And I don't want to make it too much of a competition, because you're not really competing against others. You're really competing against yourself. I feel like as humans, we want to get that 1% better every day, and we're our own sort of priority and focus. But naturally, within the sort of the brand partnerships opportunity, brands will pick people to work with. They will pick, one versus the other. So there is that sort of competitive nature to an extent. And yeah, I mean, the athletes, they've got the leg up, I feel, because they've got the on the pitch brand as well as the off the pitch. So if you've got sort of Ronaldo, for example, you've got his brand on the pitch and then he elevates it hugely off the pitch too. So he will always beat a traditional creator that's just got their off the pitch kind of, opportunity. They've not got anything additional sort of to that. So it's a bit of a positive conundrum in terms of like how to figure out the balance versus on the pitch, off the pitch, and opportunities that can be driven from both brands, because an athlete does have the two brands, on the pitch, off the pitch. You could, there are lots of athletes out there that are not the best on the field. They're not the best in their sport, but they've built like humongous brands. You got, Ilona Maher, women's rugby, 9 million followers across all her socials. She's not the best rugby player. I'm sure she'll be the first to admit that, but she's got the world's biggest rugby athlete brand, men or women. So it just shows, she was on Dancing with the Stars. She's an Adidas athlete, and that's all because she posted content and built her brand. So the space is changing, it's evolving, it's adapting, and it's exciting how it sort of develops and nurtures.
Do you have to have, just on that, because you mentioned, sorry, I forgot her name, the rugby player that you mentioned,
Ilona Maher, yeah.
do you have to have hundreds of thousands of followers to really secure these brand deals, or is it a case of if you produce genuine content? And I guess it's that distinction between audience and community.
Yeah.
You can have a million people who are an audience, but then 50,000 who are really a community.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just weighing the two, right?
Yeah, brands look for engagement. Like that's the big thing because they want to get return on investment for their investment into the athlete to create content as part of the partnership. So, you could have an athlete that's got 1 million followers, but if they only get, 1,000 likes per video or 1,000 views, that engagement is not going to be attractive to a brand. Whereas if you've got an athlete that's got 10,000 followers, but they get 2,000 or 3,000 views per video, that engagement percentage and engagement rate is so much better. So they're likely to secure a partnership as opposed to, 1 million versus then getting like 1,000 views. Like that's a bit of an extreme example, but like, yeah, community is where it's at. Community is an engaged audience. So there's that sort of, there's that difference between, oh, I've got an audience of like 1 million followers. It's like, yeah, but are they engaged? Do they actually like your content? Do they view it? Do they comment? Do they interact within it? And I think for brand partnerships, that's what unlocks more of them and more of a lucrative nature is the engagement side of it.
You think athletes have more power now than they already have done? Because you see a lot of these people, you know, they're sort of becoming brands themselves, and I feel like there's been a big shift in, especially the big athletes. They're now taking equity stakes as opposed to
Yeah.
accepting a partnership. Like, do you think the athletes have more power than maybe the brands do to a certain extent?
Good question. I agree both sides of that in terms of like the power shift and dynamic and how that might have shifted. I think athletes have got more power than ever because they've got social media and the brand building opportunity to elevate them on the pitch, elevate their brand, build a business, get equity within businesses. We're seeing that a lot more now. And within Press Upload, we want to launch a sort of a ventures arm at some point where we build businesses with athletes, but we also invest in athlete businesses. That's a huge goal we've got for the bigger picture because we see it happening. We see that we're seeing the shift. There was NBA basketball player that just invested in Chelsea women's football team, I think this week, which is huge, right? It's just massive like equity opportunities, and there's a lot of investment, a lot of dollars being sort of spread across businesses and brands, and it's really cool. And that's more broadly cool for the creator economy. How you're not only seeing athletes do this, but creators are now having sort of equity stakes in a partnership as opposed to getting paid in cash for a brand deal. They're getting equity in a business. I mean, how cool is that as a concept, right? And that will just get bigger and better. So yeah, it's really cool as a concept.
And then final couple, because I know you're short on time. How big in your opinion, can Press Upload become?
I think we're probably about 5% there. Truly, like 5%. There's so much more that we want to unlock within the business from the agency perspective. Content and commercial is what we do within the agency. The other arms of the business, we want to launch, like I said, the ventures arm. So investing in and building athlete businesses. We want to launch a media brand. We want to launch maybe even like a studio podcast or a creator studio where we launch athlete podcasts. Maybe even sort of a tech data IP sort of arms of the business too. So I want to build a bit of an empire, to be honest, a bit of an ecosystem of businesses. The agency will always be at the core of it. I'm sure of that in terms of like the main focus as such. But yeah, we're probably 5% there. I hope I'm right in saying that we're only 5% there and that we do unlock all of that extra stuff. But the opportunity is so big within this athlete brand creator economy space. Every other week there's a new footballer on YouTube, Haaland and the guy at Fulham. There's so much going on. The space is so fresh. We're probably a little bit early, if I'm being honest, a tiny little bit early, because it's not the norm at the moment for an athlete to build their brand and be on YouTube and all of that. The athletes that are doing that are doing something different, exciting, fresh. They're 10 steps ahead of the others. So once it's the norm, my hope is that we just fly. That's the hope. I hope that the space continues to sort of shift as we're seeing it do. But yeah, I'd say we're about 5% there. The hope is that we unlock a lot more, which is cool.
Perfect, Ellie. I think we'll leave it there. I'll leave a link to Press Upload because it's going out on YouTube. So I'll leave a link to Press
Nice.
Upload in the bio. Yeah, in the bio of
Yeah,
the video. But yeah, thank you again so much for your time.
no worries.
It was really insightful. And continue to smash what you're doing because
Thank you. Well,
um,
you too. I love what you're doing as well. I'd
thank
love to
you.
hear more about it, at some point. And yeah,
Yeah,
I love it. I think, combat sports, what you're trying to do and build a business behind it and a brand. Yeah, I love it. So I'm a big fan, big supporter, and just keep smashing it.
thank you.
Looks really cool.
Thank you.